Yeah, I haven't read that one. How's Phil doing? He was
Good.
he was, he was posting some stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man. I was like, oh man, I hate that.
Yeah. We are live. I'm gonna take a minute to set things up though.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, there's a restroom right there.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah, we've been recording out of here for about 6 months now.
Yeah.
I like this spot. It's a nonprofit, and like I said, they do all kinds of stuff here.
Yeah. I've had in mind to get a membership so I can work on electronics and
So you
amps
have a
projects
workshop.
till we are able to build a workshop.
That's a good place to do it. They got auto bay back there,
Mhm.
wood shop. They have a kiln for pottery.
Cool.
Yeah.
DJ turntable.
Yeah, man, they got everything.
It's a little something for everybody.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Boom. Okay. Hey, Alice. Good to see you. Thanks for standing by while I did technical stuff. We have Hyatt and Liz from Cassette Stress, some familiar faces.
Hey.
Yeah, thanks again for you guys being here. Thanks again for the recommendation. This was quite the book.
Yeah.
It's something else.
Leaves a mark.
What in your words, what is like the underlying premise to We've Always Lived in the Castle?
Well, it's like a legit like English class
Yeah.
question. Yeah, what would you say the premise is? I don't know. I think there are several themes. You've got kind of this clash of cultures between the kind of the townspeople, and then whoever like the Blackwoods and everyone that they think in the town that's fancy, so to say. You've got kind of people, the idea of people dealing with their own issues in on their own in their house, and ways that can spill out into the world at large in different ways. I don't know. What else?
What do you think it's about?
I mean, both of what Hyatt said. Yeah, I think it's somewhat about how you deal, for me personally, maybe, but how you deal with being a crazy person in a world. Like, how do you deal with being kind of eccentric? It's
Yeah.
hard to be accepted, I think, and that kind of goes along the lines of what you said, like a clash of cultures.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah, I agree with what you guys said, that there's like a lot of different points, which is why I asked you guys, because like I feel like you could get 100 people and ask them all like what is this book, and they'll
Yeah.
give you all different answers. There's a lot going on, and it's not that dense. There are elements of like when Charles Blackwood
Mhm.
comes to the house. That's kind of like there's other sections to it, but that's kind of like the meatier middle section of the book.
Yeah.
And that's like the intrusiveness
Mhm.
on their sanctuary,
Yeah.
which I think is very like metaphorical for like the female experience, where it's like this like intrusive man is like coming into their lives, and he kind of just like takes over their entire way of living.
Yeah.
Where suddenly Mary Cat just her as an example, like doesn't feel comfortable in her own home. I was reading I think it was the afterword on this actually. Oh, you remember I was telling you that I was going to get the deluxe edition?
Oh, yeah.
That's what they had on hold for me. I don't know what happened, but when I showed up, they had the same copy I picked up last time. I'm like, well, this is no different than the other one. I don't know if there is a deluxe edition or they said that over the phone.
They're like, there's printing on the cover and everything.
Yeah, it's like in Sharpie deluxe edition. But it was talking about even the firemen at the end come into the house like with the hose and like their muddy boots is like a rape allegory, which I think is interesting leading like because so that is a very big underlying thing with the book.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so like it kind of culminates at the end there when the house is on fire and they come in to put the fire out, but like there's so much leading up to that that like kind of builds that narrative. I feel like it's very well written. I did hear that the author, because like after I read it, like it just had a lot of questions, you know. It's an interesting thing because it lays out all these like kind of like mysteries and then doesn't answer any of them.
Right.
Where it's like it's completely open-ended. It's like some books have some loose ends. This one has all the ends are still loose by the time. All the questions you had when you started it, you still have those questions.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of like listening to different authors and like critics talk about it. And one was saying that this is really reflective of Shirley Jackson herself, because she lived in an estate in Vermont and was kind of a recluse.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like so I don't, this is just one person's take on it, but this one critic was saying that it's like the two sisters represent two sides of her psyche, the author's psyche, where like Merricat's kind of like the mischievous one, and then like Constance is like very prim and proper, and like those were like two sides of her. And then like Uncle Julian was supposed to be like her husband who was working on a script and like just rambled on about it.
Right.
Yeah. When I heard that, it suddenly like kind of opened my eyes to the book itself, where it's like everything in this is symbolic. It's less about, you know what it reminds me of is like a painting. Like if like a painting doesn't tell you a story, it gives you an image and you kind of build a story around it. That's how this feels to me, where it's like you get an image and it's up to you to build the narrative around it. It's
what is the reception of the book when it was first published?
I think it's pretty mixed from what I hear. Yeah, like some people did not like it. I think it's actually more negative when it first came out, then like became like a cult classic kind of thing. But I don't think it was very well received. It had very mixed reviews, I believe.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's a very like I can see you either loving this book or just having no idea like why did someone make me read this. It's very strange. I mean, yeah, there are just so many layers of dysfunction, just examples of dysfunctional relationships among individuals and different groups of people in this that I just thought was really interesting. So you've got Merricat, who's obviously a whole force of nature unto herself. And then you've got Constance, who's sort of trying to be the responsible one, but is definitely has her own dysfunction and sort of papering over all of these, all of this wild behavior and crazy behavior. And then you've got, the sort of grasping family member who's coming in the form of Charles and trying to tell regulate everyone else who's not living the kind of life that he thinks that they should. And you've got the interactions with the people of the town and, how they approach the Blackwood family and, their whole situation. And I don't know, there's just pretty much every relationship in the book between anybody is kind of dysfunctional.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's the family friend who tries to come help out, and it's kind of like the one person who's sort of, on you could say is on an even keel and maybe not quite as dysfunctional as other people, is almost like helpless against the tide of all, of everyone else.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a whole family. Everyone in that family is dysfunctional, even the
Yeah.
ones we just hear about that are already
Yeah.
dead. It raises like, man. So you specifically told me not to, but I watched the movie and it was so bad. God. You guys tried to warn me.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I just heard that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. I didn't even know there was one.
It's atrocious. It's
It
so
came out very
bad.
recently.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it was like, yeah, like 2018, 2019, something like that.
Yeah.
It's not good. It's really, really bad. It's like I was watching it with a friend, and at first I was like, man, why is the acting? Because there's like some big name actors in it. But I'm like, why is the acting so just like stale? Like the delivery
Yeah.
is just so bad. And I'm like, my friend pointed out to me, he's like, no, look how consistent it is, though. He's like, everyone delivers their lines like that. He's like, that is a direction thing. And I'm like, no, actually, you're right.
Interesting.
It's like that's a choice they made.
Yeah.
It's not bad acting. It's just like the director. It's like, you got too much enthusiasm. Can you just like deliver it bland, like you're reading it off the script? And it's like everyone talks like that in the book. I mean, in the movie. It's oh, but the other thing I really like the book specifically, like okay, so like for example, it's not clear why Maricat like poisoned her family. They don't really ever like what happened,
Yeah.
In the movie, it's like they really they leave less mystery there. Like that's I guess that's my biggest gripe with it, besides like the horrible direction, is that there's no nuance to it. Like there's a couple of parts where Charles just like straight up assaults Constance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that, almost like him not doing that in the book, like actually almost builds more tension to me, where it's like so much is implied.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not even clear like what their relationship is, like Constance and Charles. Like there's a lot, because you're seeing it from Maricat's perspective, so it's kind of like not really clear what's going on with them. But it's like the movie is just like any nuance or subtlety is just completely out the window.
Yeah.
But I guess like to credit the book by comparison, it's like there is so much you could read into. It's actually the perfect book for a book club. I was thinking that when I was reading it, because like you could get a bunch of people and just like talk about it for hours, because it is very like open to interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like saying that could almost like if you haven't read the book, saying that might make it sound lazy or like it doesn't have any direction. But I think it's actually really, that's something she did really well, is the way it's open-ended.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, because I think that's one thing, even though, I mean, the whole situation just seems very, strange and extreme, and like it's something that couldn't happen, but it's almost the ambiguity that makes it feel more real, because that's kind of how it is in, people's relationships and in families, and things happen, is there, there's not like some clear this thing happened and then everything else. There's all these layers and building up of things over time, and
Yeah.
years and things going back to the great uncle or the granddad and all these things that just have happened over the years that have kind of built up to make the situation the way it is. But there's no thing that happened. It's layers on layers of relationships and conversations and things that happen.
Yeah.
That's I think one of the things that made that whole book feel very real to me is that there's like not one thing that happened and then that's because that's very like cinematic or something like would be in a play. Everything in this is so much more ambiguous and there's no one reason for stuff. There's just resentments and feelings and things that happened and something that no one talks about that happened 20 years ago. A lot of that.
So why do you think Mary Cat did it?
That's a good question. So it is interesting, like if it was something with like someone specific, like her father, why would she kill everybody?
Yeah.
So it's like I think she hints to it being like a protection for Constance. Like, oh, you know what? I guess, which I really don't know, but I guess if I had to guess, it's like Constance is like growing up and like expected maybe to move out to like find a suitor or something.
Yeah.
And it's like she's protecting her that way, or maybe you could argue like protecting herself from like being without her, I guess.
I think she was kind of obsessed with Constance. Yeah.
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's that whole scene in the there's that whole scene where she's in that like dilapidated sort of fallen in summer house where she's talking about everyone going around the table talking about how great Maricat was. And you very much get the impression that that's what she wanted everyone to have said about her. But no, you kind of get the sense that she was always sort of like the problem child. And everyone just kind of ganged up on her. And I think that maybe that fed into what you were just talking about, that Constance was kind of like her protector and everyone was against her. And she just kind of had a
temper tantrum.
Had a temper tantrum. It was like, this is a temper tantrum with arsenic.
Yeah.
And just had it with everybody.
I think that's probably, if I had to guess, that's probably what happened is like Constance is leaving for one reason or another, maybe to go to school or something else. And it's like, no, because like now I'm going to be alone with you assholes.
Yeah.
I as I was reading it, like there's so much spell work she does, which I did read that like Shirley Jackson was really into the occult and witchcraft. And just in my own studies, I found it very accurate. Like what Mary Cat's doing is called sympathetic magic, where it's like kind of a trademark example that would be like voodoo, where it's like what happens in one place happens in another. So she's like burying these things that are symbolic of other things.
Yeah.
And like the word, she has like special words and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like writing down notes when she's going through town. I notated every time that she cursed everyone, where it's like I wish they were all dead,
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, like the conclusion to this. And then I got to the end and I'm like, wait, that's it. Not in a bad way though, because it's like you could go back and read it again,
Right.
But like less is more in a lot of narrative, I feel like. You don't want to like over explain things. But there's a lot of that. John from Resistance House Band was telling me that apparently someone wrote like a really like scathing review of this book, and Shirley Jackson hexed him and told him, "You're safe right now, but don't ever come out here because you won't be." And apparently he went to like the books takes place in Vermont, which is where Shirley Jackson lived. And apparently he went like into that area to go skiing or something, and like broke his leg which is like a
Oh,
pretty
wow.
common like skiing injury, you know.
Yeah.
But it also is
But
just kind of
still.
like it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she seems like she herself was a very troubled person. Maricat, her the author's daughter uh had a nickname like that, like something
Okay.
cat. And so that's she's borrowing elements from her actual life. I think it's a very personal book for her.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a level of like, you know, resentment and things that cut deep in this book that, you know, that it feels too personal to
Yeah,
me.
you can't completely make up those characters and some of the traits.
Yeah, like back to Charles, like that came from a real place. That's an abusive relationship at some point in her life.
Yeah.
Like and it's like really chilling Constance's reaction to a lot of it, where she's just complacent. Like
Mhm.
you remember when he comes back after the fire and he's knocking on the door, and like she almost answers the door.
Right.
She like almost calls out, and it's like that is it's so like
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, it hits you, man. It's like it's chilling. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely like you guys are saying, comes from a very personal place. How does this compare to like some of her other works?
So the two other things that I've read of hers are a short story called The Lottery, which has a lot of similarity in
Very similar
tone,
elements.
yeah, in tone to like all the interactions with the townspeople in this. And then there's
The Haunting of Hill House.
Haunting of Hill House,
Mhm.
which is this book is so idiosyncratic and so personal. The Haunting of Hill House is more, it reads more like a regular novel,
Mhm.
but I don't know, there's the setting of the, you know, an old dilapidated house way out in the middle of somewhere. Definitely some common themes and you know, a lot of very difficult personalities that are kind of warring with each other um, over the course of it. Yeah, yeah, a lot of similar.
Okay,
Lot,
like family dysfunction and like kind of like being unwelcome in an area, I guess. It's like
yes,
kind of recurring themes with her.
very much
Yeah.
so. Yeah,
Okay, that's interesting.
yeah. I mean, in that case, it's the
Makes
house.
sense that she was a recluse then.
Yeah.
The house itself that's, you know, unwelcoming, but you know, but definitely kind of there is a character in that book that's also, you know, someone that everyone else has to look after and who's kind of always going around doing unpredictable things. And that's, I don't know, that's a sort of interesting common thread between the two of them.
Is that like a younger sibling in that as well? Like
I can't
or like a
remember.
child?
It's been a minute since I've read that one.
I watched the series, like the Netflix series. And if I recall, there was like, now that you mention it, I do remember there was like kind of like a trouble daughter. It was like the
Mhm.
youngest, I feel like.
Yeah.
Maybe I might be getting confused with something else, but yeah. That's cool. I'd be interested to read some of her other stuff.
Yeah.
To see because it's such a unique book. Like I've never read anything quite like that.
I
Um,
haven't either.
I guess how did you guys first come across this?
Where do we even?
They just picked it up in an independent bookshop one time. I saw it in the binding, caught my eye, and I was like, and then pulled it out. I was like, oh, that looks interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The etching on the cover is really, you know, arresting. So
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
you know, yeah, that is how we found it.
Yeah, it is a good cover. It's man, it like okay, so like the opening line, she says
Yeah, I love the first paragraph, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So good.
yeah, I'll just read that. My name is Mary Catherine Blackwood. I am 18 years old and I live with my sister Constance. I have often thought that with any luck at all, I could have been born a werewolf because the two middle fingers on both my hands are the same length. But I've had to be content with what I had. I dislike washing myself and dogs and noise. I like my sister Constance and Richard Plantagenet and Amanita phalloides, the death cup mushroom. Everyone else in my family is dead. That is a great fucking opening paragraph.
Yeah.
But she says in the second sentence here, I am 18 years old. And I would have to go back and read this first paragraph again to remember that, because she seems so much like mentally so much younger than that.
Oh, yeah, for
Very
sure.
much
I would
so.
have guessed 12, 13.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like she, like time stopped for her when everything happened with the
Oh,
family.
that's a good point,
in a
yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because it's been like 6 years or something, I think 5-6 years. Yeah, she never stopped. She quit developing after that happened. Actually, that raises some interesting questions, because at some point Uncle Julian says Mary Catherine's been dead, that she died and died in the orphanage or something.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, is she a ghost? Because the neighbor comes by and she doesn't address her at all. Like, she's talking to Constance, but doesn't seem to acknowledge Mary Catherine at all. That being said, Charles acknowledges her,
Right.
and she goes into town and buys groceries.
Right.
So it's, I don't know.
I hadn't thought about that.
It kind of be a stretch to say that she's a ghost,
Mhm.
but she also talks about ghosts. Like, she describes Charles as a demon and a ghost. I kind of thought that's how it was going to resolve, is that she, like a Sixth Sense kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, no, I don't necessarily think that's what's going on, because there's too many there's too many plot holes for that to be the case. But yeah. I've never read anything that didn't, like, just had so many questions. Like, it's just one giant question mark, really.
Yeah.
Like, even the people in town, I thought they were going to be like a larger part of the story, but that's really just to establish the setting.
Mhm.
It's completely unpredictable. Like, you cannot guess what's going to happen,
Yeah.
It's like a thriller in a book, which is but like almost like a movie thriller in the form of a book.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's wild.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me to think about, like, would they have just kept on living their same lives had not had all of the events of the book not happened? So they were just like, it seemed like they had regular habits every week. Mary Cat always went to the store on the same day every week, walk the same paths and everything. Like, would they have just kept on living there in that way had none of the other events happened? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe they might have. I get the impression that they would have.
Yeah.
I think
The
they
habits kind of kept them somewhat sane, and then equilibrium until, like, outside forces kind of disrupted all of those.
I think you're onto something there, because it's like she goes to such lengths to preserve their way of life. Like, she has all these like safety mechanisms buried, or like she nails the book to the tree, and she's very, like, aware that outside influence will disrupt their way of being. So I think if Mary Catherine had it her way, that is exactly what would happen, is they continue exactly the way they are until they all died.
Yeah. By arsenic or other means.
Yeah. Uncle Julian is an interesting character too. Like, he's obsessed with the day that everyone died. And he tells Constance, he's like, that did happen, didn't it?
Yeah.
Because he's so in his narrative, and I guess he's also suffering from illness, but he's so in his book that it's like, if you're trying to, like, recall an event and you're writing it down, what you're really remembering is, like, what you wrote down, and it kind of almost, the lines of what's real and what aren't become blurred. And I think that's a cool element that they explored as well.
For sure.
And just dealing with the PTSD of it all.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
And having that, disrupt reality of what actually happened.
he seems like he's convinced that Constance did it. It seems like maybe I'm reading into that too much, but when the neighbors come by, he's like, my niece was acquitted of the crimes. There's nothing to fear here. And he thinks Mary Catherine's dead.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Like that's definitely like the impression the book gives you from this onset is that Constance did it until later on you kind of realize a little bit better what's going on. Because there's that part at the end where, oh wait, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
I just remembered my favorite part was when she goes to the moon, her little hideaway, and the cat speaks to her. You remember this?
I don't remember.
Vaguely. Like, yeah.
It's
Okay. Yeah. I think
she
so.
the cat talks at one point. Let me see if I can find it because that was really fucking cool.
Yeah. Well, that was also sort of an interesting thing about, Uncle Julian going around and talking about the events of the day and spending all this time putting his notes together and trying to figure out what happened, where he's talking about this every day, all day, with the two people who actually know what happened, and they don't say a word about it, which is really interesting. Everybody just kind of, well, like you were saying, it's like the equilibrium, or you were saying that, Liz, that they're just trying to keep everything in this equilibrium, and Uncle Julian being obsessed with it and
Keeps
kind
him
of
entertained.
kind of puttering around, like that's part of the equilibrium.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I thought there was going to be kind of a like, okay, so like when Charles first shows up, it's like, he's like, you shouldn't be hung up on the past, talking to Uncle Julian, like you need to move on with your life. And he's telling Constance, like, you know, Mary Cat's behavior is like, it's not healthy for her. And it's like, you need to do this and this. And it's like, it becomes later on, it's like very clear that he's like not a good presence. But at some point I thought maybe him being a bad presence is kind of in Mary Catherine's head. And it's like, he's actually like not a bad guy.
Mm.
And she's just, because all of it is through her lens of perspective. And obviously she's has a skewed interpretation of reality. So I don't really think that's one of the elements that Shirley Jackson's really going for. But I did think at a certain part that that's kind of what she was doing. I think it becomes clearer later on that it's like, no, there's nothing redeemable about this character. He's kind of a piece of shit. But yeah.
Yeah, he just seemed to me like the person who I don't know, he just kind of seemed like petty and grasping, like he just wanted to come in and take all this stuff that was at the house and just wanted everybody to have a place to live and have all these things, and for everyone in the house just to act, quote unquote, act normal by his interpretation, so he can just live there comfortably and not have to deal with any of them.
Yeah.
He just kind of wanted to come into the situation and sort of take it over for his own.
Oh, for sure. It was entirely
Uses.
selfish motivation.
Yeah.
He not very well, but he tries to portray himself as like this virtuous, I'm coming
Right.
in to like save you.
Of course. Yeah.
But like yeah, no, it becomes very clear that he's not a good guy, not a virtuous character at all. No, it's near the middle somewhere. I'm pretty sure it's the first night that Charles shows up. This will be worth it if I can find it. Um, she mentions the moon, going to the moon, and then whenever she goes through her hiding hole, she's like, "Finally, I'm on the moon," and it's like, Okay, she's not actually talking about the moon. She's talking about her little hideaway. Jonas, that's the name of the cat.
That's a good name.
It's a good name for a cat.
I like the detail in that where they're talking about all the preserves down in the
Yeah.
down in the basement, and just, I mean, that to me was just so emblematic of um just like the years. It's kind of like that house was just building up, years and years of, I don't know, preserves or necessarily dysfunctions, but just the idea of, all these things building up and kind of becoming part of this whole family story, and that everyone has had a sort of a hand
Yeah.
and the situation that they're in now, in a way.
Yeah, they it's also like it is so this house has been in the family for generations, and the women of the house keep stockpiling food,
Yeah.
and it's like they don't eat that, like they
Right.
ever they never open that. And it kind of reminds me of like Mary Catherine kind of does the same thing, like she's burying things all over, like as Charles points out, like even like money, like things they can use. And it's that probably, it makes me wonder, like she so like the idea of like burying money, or like nailing her father's book to the tree, is these are items of value, like the watch, like she uses the watch. And basically like it being a real sacrifice, not just something, but like something of value, like bestows that power. So
Yeah.
it makes me wonder if like that's something she learned from her family, where it's like
Interesting.
they're preserving all this food. It's like maybe there is a reason to that besides just habit.
Yeah.
Like where does Mary Catherine learn about magic, actually,
That's
it's
a good
like
point. Yeah.
because she's enthralled with it. She's very much a believer, and it's it where she got that is not clear at all.
Yeah, that's a good. I'm trying to remember if there's anything in there, but it.
I got the impression it wasn't that she was taught it, but she just came up with it on her own. That was like her
part of her whole imagination.
Yeah, and then the way that she kind of had all these habits and quirks of doing things to kind of, again, keep her in equilibrium and help her deal with the world.
Yeah, it's like intuitive. That's a good point. That makes sense to me.
Like, oh, she's also obsessed with the death cap mushroom.
Oh yeah. So funny thing about that, in the beginning here, I was reading that the first time it's mentioned, where is it? It should be in the first paragraph. The death cup mushroom.
Sorry, death cup.
No, you're right. I was reading that Amanita phalloides is the death cap mushroom, but her editor was like, death cup sounds better.
Oh. Huh.
Which is like not a thing.
I think I just read it as death cap. And I didn't even notice.
So apparently the first time it's mentioned in the book, because it's in the first paragraph, her editor was like, death cup sounds better. But it's like, that's not a thing. Like, what are you doing? It's funny how like like too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like
I guess find the bit with the cat.
Yeah, me either. I know it's in here. I I thought I had it, then I realized I went too far, so I'm going back now. Like I wonder how many other little things her editor was like, no, you need to do it this way. She must have been an established author too at this point. Well, obviously she had, I know, like you mentioned the lottery, like that was kind of a big one for her, like kind of put her on the map. But this book is very experimental, so it's like her publisher trusted her a lot with it, where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I think I found it. Oh, I had it. No, that's not it.
There's something else I was thinking of that I liked from this. Oh, just how, so even from the beginning, the kids have their sort of like nursery rhymes making fun of them.
Mhm.
And but by the almost like they're legendary figures already. And then by the time you get to the end of the book, like they literally have become a legend in the town, you know, as if they don't never actually existed and were always sort of
Yeah, they're
ghosts.
ghosts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, they're also cruel to them too, like
Oh,
throwing
yeah.
rocks at their windows and
Mhm.
shit, just destroying everything. It makes you wonder, like, what did the Blackwoods do? Because like obviously they're kind
Yeah.
of like pious and assholes, but like it's not really clear that they deserved that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there
I
were
never thought
some.
that they did. I thought that they were just like the townspeople were mad that the Blackwoods sort of kept to themselves and did their own thing and, you know,
Yeah.
didn't maybe interact with the town or, you know, make friends with a lot of people. That's kind of the impression that I got. And that was the resentment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were a couple of things where there was that whole bit with the guy who came to fix the
step,
step,
yeah.
Mhm.
and he was talking about how, oh well, you know, I'm good enough to come fix the step, but you know, you'd never see me invited to the Blackwoods table. I think
Mhm.
the townspeople thought that they were like, you know,
Highfalutin.
highfalutin. Yeah, for sure. They were highfalutin and, you know, thought that they were better than all the townspeople. And then it was kind of when things went sour and there was the murder, it was kind of everybody's chance to, you know, say, well, yeah, look at them. They think they're so fancy and all they are just a bunch of, you know, they're either dead or crazy.
Yeah.
You know, and then the whole thing with the fire was kind of like their final act of, you know, revenge and destruction against them.
Mhm.
Yeah. I just decided I'd look it up where it's at. Oh,
I
I
don't.
think it says chapter 3. I think that's the part I'm looking for. This is so worth it because basically he's telling her a story. And he calls it a cat story. It's chapter 2. I should have bookmarked it. I usually do that. I take a lot of notes when we
Yeah.
do book club.
Yeah, having the cat tell the cat story kind of makes me think of Watership Down.
Oh, yeah.
Rabbits and the Rabbit stories.
Oh yeah, man. El Harira. Did you ever watch any of the like adaptations of that?
No, I've heard that the animated version traumatized a lot of people as kids.
Yeah,
And I can see why I haven't read the book. I've never seen it.
that's Emily Jared was telling me that.
Oh yeah.
that she watched the movie and it freaked her out. It's pretty bad. Like it's I mean not it's pretty graphic.
Yeah.
Like it's a
I want to see it
70s.
now.
Yeah. It's a 70s kids movie. So it's like still edgy, you know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, people still coming off the counterculture, the 60s and 70s when they, you know, all those things were done. You ever seen the old rotoscope, like the partly animated, partly rotoscope Lord of the Rings
Oh man,
thing?
I've never
That-
watched it. I've seen clips of
It
it.
is bananas.
I really want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really good. I mean, it only goes up to, I don't know, maybe partway through Two Towers, I think.
It's still
so just
covering a
kinda-
lot of ground.
Yeah, so it just kind of ends at a random spot, but like I don't know. There's
What
something
happened? Why did they not finish it?
I don't know. I don't know if they just didn't want to spoil the book or they just got to that point and I don't know. I have to go read about it.
It's probably like limitations because like at the time it's really hard to make something animated.
Mhm.
Like everything is hand drawn. Where it's like nowadays, even like the best stuff, like Disney movies and anime, it's not actually drawn.
Yeah.
Like they it's all computer generated and appears to look drawn.
Yeah, that one's really weird. So that was done by, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, Ralph Bakshi, who did that movie Wizards, which is also 70s, really, really weird. Late 70s, I think, early 80s. A really weird animated thing. I think I'm trying to make you watch that one, so I don't think we made it.
I don't recall.
Sorry, y'all. I really want to find this because it's worth bringing up.
Yeah, I looked
Yeah.
through chapter 3 and I couldn't find it
Yeah.
anywhere. So maybe it's earlier,
It's got to be later.
later.
It's got to be.
Yeah, I like in the book how Jonas is just always following Mary Cat around and just kind of, appearing. He'll go and often do his own thing, and then he'll just kind of come back and settle down next to her. That's definitely somebody who's, been around a lot of cats. Write that description.
She runs away from Charles, and that's when Jonas tells her.
Okay, so that's midpoint or later, probably.
Yeah. There's a lot of analysis on this book. It must be something that people read in school.
I've never really read any analysis or anything beyond the book. I probably ought to.
There's
I'm interested to see what other people think.
there's
I'm
a
sorry.
lot. No, I was just there's a lot of it, like people talking about what happens in the story. This might be it.
So look around page 52, 53.
Okay, according to this, chapter 4.
Yeah, I think that's where I am.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, it's in chapter 4. You called it 50, page 52, 53. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I was looking at the end of each chapter. That was the problem.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of in the middle of the chapter. The trees around and the overhead were so thick that it was always dry inside, and on Sunday morning I lay there with Jonas, listening to his stories. All cat stories start with the statement, "My mother, who was the first cat, told me this." and I lay with my head close to Jonas and listened. There was no change coming. I thought, here, only spring. I was wrong to be so frightened. Let me jump down a little bit. Oh, wait, maybe I thought there was more to this story. Maybe that's all there was. Yeah, I guess that's it. He tells her a story, but she doesn't get into what that story is. She just says, my mother, who is the first, or Jonas says, my mother, who is the first cat, told me this. And then it doesn't get into what story he told.
Mhm.
But that kind of threw me for a loop where it's like, as soon as they're alone, Jonas is talking to her. It's like very much like a familiar. Right? It's like,
oh yeah.
this is what is this cat?
Mhm.
It's like, and make actually, I wonder. No, yeah, Constance interacts with Jonas,
Mhm.
so he's not an imaginary friend or anything like that. Well, actually, I guess it could be, because if she's aware that Mary Catherine has an imaginary friend, she might just be playing into it.
Mhm.
That's probably reading into it too much, but yeah, she has a talking cat, which I was also disappointed they didn't do in the movie at all. They completely just skipped over that. I'm like, what the fuck? That was like one of the most interesting things.
What does she mean by my mother, who was the first cat?
Right before that, she says, all cat stories start with the statement, my mother, who was the first cat, told me this, which she doesn't say all of Jonas's stories start this way. She says all cat stories start that way. Which is very Watership Down, where it's like El Horai was the first of all rabbits.
Mhm.
It's probably like hyperbolic. It's like we have a lot of, even as people, we have a lot of myths about like religion is like that's not where we came from. That's not how it works. But we have these stories about where we came from,
Mhm.
and they do have value, just not as a literal history.
Mhm.
I think actually not to get too far down that, but I think you actually lose, like for example, if you're to look at like the Garden of Eden story, it's like you actually lose a lot of the value in that if you think that's literally what happened, because it's like that's actually like kind of deep what they're talking about, but it's not trying to tell you, hey guys,
Mhm.
the earth is 5,000 years old and we came from two people. Like that's
Yeah.
not the interpretation that the author wished people to have. That's actually like a very modern take on that. Something like 500 years people have thought that. But
Yeah.
if I had to guess, it's probably something like that, where it's uh like the cats maybe have a mythos about like where they came from. Same way like tribalistic people would, or like the rabbits in Watership Down. It's like they probably, the things with El Harira probably didn't happen.
Mhm.
It's probably, or if they did, it's like it was a group of rabbits that kind of just these things happen, but like now it's been overblown
Mhm.
over time.
Yeah.
Actually, in Norse mythology, shout out to Jesse Stillwagon from Midgard Musings. A friend of mine has a great podcast on everything Norse mythology. But something he was telling me is like probably when we're reading like there's a name for it, but basically where a lot of the Norse myths
Mhm.
come from. We're probably reading about the Asir tribe was probably a tribe of warriors,
Mhm.
like Vikings, that their stories got
Yeah.
fleshed out over time to be these like the size of gods,
Mhm.
And I think that's a very human thing. Like that's kind of our story as well, where
Yeah.
that's kind of just what we do as people. It's like, of course we're curious about how any of this is possible. So we develop all kinds of mythologies about it.
Yeah.
And there's probably a grain of truth in there too, you know. It's like I know with like back to scripture, it's like there's a lot of truth in scripture. Only if you don't take it, only if you understand that it's a metaphor. It's like one of my point two examples for this is the book of Job, where it's like, as a kid, I hated that story. You guys familiar with that story?
Mhm.
As a kid, I hated that story because it's like, if you're Job, why the fuck would you serve this God who is like playing with your life and your family's lives to settle a score with Hasatan? And it's like, uh, that's because how it was taught to me is not how that story is supposed to be interpreted. The moral of that story is Job doesn't know that there's a conversation in heaven taking place.
Right.
All he knows is that shit keeps going bad around him. Like his
Right.
family gets killed by a tornado, and like the three wise men come up to him and they're like, "You should renounce God." And his answer to that is basically like, dude, everything, like my family and all my children, everything I have is gone. What good is it going to do me to like shake my fist at the sky? That's just going to piss me off more. He's like, oh, always look on the bright side is kind of the moral of that story. But if you go, yeah, dude, there's a guy in the heavens talking to another guy in the heavens, and they're battling over the fate of humanity. That story loses a lot of its like potency, in my opinion. That's we kind of got way off track, but that I kind of feel like that's kind of what's going on with the cat story. Is it's like you have if cats could talk and communicate with each other, they'd probably hand down histories of like other cats throughout history. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a different interpretation of what he meant by my mother is the first cat. I'd be interested in if y'all thought about this, but that kind of contrasting the the human history and all these things building up, that the idea that the cats, as far as Jonas knew, his mother was the first cat, because they don't really didn't really have a sense of continuity of history outside their own mother. There is that sort of a contrast with humans, that there is no history, that they just are born, and their mother is the first cat that ever existed as far as their perspective is. And
that's that. Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
I
that
don't
makes
know.
sense.
that does make a lot of sense, where maybe it's not a story that's been handed down. It's like that is his entire world is
Mhm.
this, like, I'm the second cat.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the story could be handed down, but as far as he knows, that they all sprung, this is all story from his mother, even though I don't know, just, or maybe just that there is history, but there's no sense of it in a way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what they're living with Uncle Julian trying to remember the truth.
Oh yeah.
shit.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, what? Yeah. It's not even clear to the characters, like, what the fuck is happening.
Mhm.
I did, in one of the analysis things I was reading, analyses, he's talking about how Uncle Julian's kind of representative of the reader, who's like asking these questions
Right,
themselves.
yeah.
Where it's like,
Oh yeah.
it's like,
That makes
what
sense.
did happen that night? Yeah. Trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And we get to the end and we don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. It's to pull back to something you said earlier, like the vagueness of it makes it feel very real, because it's like if you have a falling out with a sibling, or like a partner or something like that, it's like it's not clear where exactly things went wrong, or like why there's like that thing, but there, because nothing's ever that simple.
Yeah.
It's always a history of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys have, we're kind of getting to an hour now. Do you guys
Yeah.
have any kind of closing remarks about this or anything you else wanted to talk about?
No, I think we covered a lot of things. This is just one of my favorite books because there's something so real. And I mean, even though the characters are really extreme, it's it's easy to see, how just how this came, this came from real people, or I guess in this case, one person. Like I can see those two sides being in somebody where you've got kind of a wild side and you've got the rest for personality who's trying to maybe limit and manage a little bit the wild side and keep it from just spinning completely out of control.
Yeah. Real art is vulnerable. It's like it's kind of a sacrifice. Like you're sacrificing I don't know, you could call it therapeutic too. Maybe not just sacrifice, but you're letting out things that are specifically difficult. And I know personally, like writing can be very therapeutic. Like like help me work through things too. Or it's like or just like talking. Like that's a big part of therapy is just saying the things that maybe you've had bottled up a long time. Yeah, it's a raw book. It's
Yeah.
I definitely recommend it.
It's worth reading multiple times.
Yeah.
It still stays fresh, and just give it a little bit of time and you'll read it again and feel like you discovered it all over.
Yeah.
It's probably the book I've read the most of any book ever.
Thanks again for recommending it. This was again
sure.
like a perfect book for what we're doing. I feel like just because like it is yeah, you could get a million different takes on it. Whereas something like I'm a really big fan of Song and Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones books. He explains everything, like Lord of the Rings. It's like there's tons to talk about, but it's nothing about that is open-ended.
Right.
It's like there might be things that are purposefully vague, but that's like not the point. Like he's trying to like kind of actually while we're on the subject, I there's what do you call that, like high fantasy, like Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones. And to me, that is like, that's an author giving you kind of a glimpse into this entire world he's created.
Yeah.
Whereas you have something like Wizard of Oz, which I would consider more in alignment with like the Iliad or the Odyssey or Dante's Inferno, or like a religious text where it's like, it's not okay. So like when I read Wizard of Oz, I don't feel like there's an entire world outside of what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I feel like the entire world is what I'm looking at currently. There could just be blackness outside of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas like you read high fantasy, it's like it really envelops you in that universe where it's like there's 100 different characters doing things simultaneously to what you're reading.
Yeah.
That this would fall more in the Odyssey category to me, where it's like it's not clear that the world exists outside of this town at all. There's just Vermont, this tiny town in Vermont.
Right. Yeah.
And everything's allegorical, really, for her struggles, what she was going through, and there's a lot of elements of this that are very relatable. It's like if you ever been in an abusive relationship, it's like that's they did a really good job with that.
Yeah.
And other elements too, just feeling out of place. It's I don't again, like it's all through Mary Catherine's perspective. So it's like the town might not hate them as much as she thinks they do. And there's a lot of evidence to the contrary of what I'm saying, because they burned down her house or they raid her house and like Charles is a piece of shit. But like, I guess, again though, that's like the story itself is kind of. Did any of that happen? You know,
Yeah.
or is that all in her head? Right? She might have died that night, and this is the afterlife for all I know.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys again. This has been
Thanks for having us.
this is
a lot of fun.
this book was really a great thing. Thank you again, Liz.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything coming up? Any shows?
Yeah, we got 3 coming up in May. So we're playing May 10th at Gunk House, and we're playing May 24th at Cobra, and May 31st at Springwater. The busy month.
Hell yeah. Yeah, definitely check out Cassette Stress if you haven't already. They're very fucking cool.
Thanks.
Next month, I don't have a copy of it, but we're reading Blood Meridian, which will be interesting. All I know about it is that it's very graphic and disturbing. That's really all I know. It's also a Western, which I've never read a Western. We haven't done a Western on the podcast, so that might be like a first and a last Western we do on the show.
True Grit's pretty good if you haven't read that.
Oh, I have it.
Yeah.
Is that the same Cormac McCarthy or
No.
someone else?
I think it's somebody different.
It's
Yeah.
something. Is that Griffith? D.W. Griffith or something? Maybe I'm misremembering that.
My dad read a lot of Louis L'Amour books
Yeah.
when I was growing up.
Same.
I'm actually going to New York a couple weeks.
Oh, cool. Right.
Going to see my family.
Cool.
So I think I'm gonna take my dad a copy of Blood Meridian too.
Yeah.
Just feel like he might be interested in it.
Totally.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
Alice.
look forward-
Oh, sorry. What were you gonna
Oh
say?
no. Look forward to Blood Meridian.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. It'll be something. Well, Alice, thanks for tuning in. We will see you next week.